for the sake of all beings, wisdom, compassion, non-clinging awareness. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. I'd like to begin with a little bit of contemplative thinking, shall we say.
Yeah.
Could people mute themselves? Yeah. Some of you might call this meditation, but I'll just call it contemplative thinking. And I'm going to recite a verse which many of you know quite well, and it uses the pronoun my or I, right? And so even though I'm saying this, let these words be your words, right? See if you can, in a sense, wear these words, right? And we're going to kind of contemplatively think about the only thing that we can possibly contemplatively think about, and that is our body of experience. We've got nothing else to work with. Right? This body of mine is composed of atoms born in stars. Now, although I said it's kind of contemplative thinking, what about maybe extending it a bit further, and we could have contemplative thinking and feeling? Right? Can I feel this as a composition of atoms born in stars? Molecules, cells, tissues and organs. It's a collaboration of uncountable viruses, bacteria, fungi, plants and animals. This body of experience of mine is composed of all these. It is conditioned by families and societies, by thoughts and dreams. It's an interbeing, interknowing of all these processes from micro to macro. Wondrous, utterly transient. May it teach me wisdom. Just breathing with this. And then in your mind's eye, turn to a friend, turn to a tree, turn to a plant, turn to a pet, right? Turn to a workmate and say these words: this body of yours is composed of atoms born in stars, molecules, cells, tissues and organs. Can we find a place of such sensitivity that we can almost feel this fluidity of being and becoming that is ourselves and all the beings and things that we meet? I'd like to try to enhance this experience by reading a poem by Padian Rogers And it goes like this. I am surrounded by stars. They cover me completely like an invisible silk veil full of sequins. They touch me one by one, everywhere. Hands, shoulders, lips, ankle hollows, thigh reclusions. Particular in their presence, like rain, individual drops. They come also in streams, in storms. Careening, they define more precisely than wind. They enter cheekbone, breastbone, spine, skull, moving out and in and out, through like threads, like weightless grains of beads in their orbits and rotations, their ritual passages. They are the luminescence of blood and circuit the body. They are showers of fire filling the dark myriad spaces of porous bone. What could be nearer to flesh than light? And I swallow stars. I eat stars. I breathe stars. I survive on stars. They sound precisely humming in my nose, in my throat, on my tongue. Stars, stars, stars. They are above me, suspended, drifting, caught in the loom of the elm tree, similarly enmeshed in my hair. They are below me, straight down in the deep. I am immersed in stars. I swim through stars, their swells and currents. I walk on stars. They are less, they are more, even than water, even than earth. They come with immediacy. They are as bound to me as history. No knife, no death can part us. Immeasurable expanse of nature in process. In faith and trust and wonderment, we give ourselves to this suchness, the seamless mystery of birthing, dying. Spacious, loving, with feet solid in the earth, we nurture the hints of blessedness, the myriad faces and masks of luminous knowing. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. last Sunday when we gathered, we began with a kind of, talked a bit about the kind of overall title that I've given to this, which is Living Dharma in a Living World. And I suggested that you could all see yourselves as yogis of the natural world. You're born out of the world, right? You're born out of the process of nature and so on, and you're coming to know this. We feel often so separated and distanced and alienated, if you like, from the processes of nature. We're shrunk into our little bubbles, even though in another moment you do know that you're inseparably part of nature, and yet we live as if we weren't. And so there is this, the kind of yogis of the natural world is a kind of a bit of an interior pun, right? In that it suggests that we're already absolutely inseparably yoked. No knife can separate us. No death can separate us, right? But at the same time, we are recognizing that we often forget this. And in that forgetting, an immense amount of struggle and suffering can arise. And occasionally, sometimes not as much as we think we might like, right, arises a yearning to do something about it, right? And so we're now practicing the yoga, not the yoga of some contrived religious exercise, but the yoga of the natural world in process, right? It's like entering back into the stream that we've already been. And we particularly considered, or at least we just begin to lift the veil a tiny bit on the possibility of exploring love in a time of falling apart. What would that mean? How does that work? Right? Those of us who are physically falling apart, or it feels like that from time to time, we can really relate to this. Right? But if you've ever had a concern about the state of the world, right? The state of millions of refugees with no home, right? The state of, ecological catastrophe, right? The state of kind of falling apart politics and kind of social, methods, if you like, of living well together, right? Then maybe love in a time of falling apart is just as meaningful. You don't have to be an old geezer like me, right? And all these different layers are there, right? And I'd like to give a little bit of time before we go any further to this theme of looking at some facets of clear seeing, right? Because there's so many, we can't possibly touch on all the facets of clear seeing, right? But before we do that, I wonder if there are any observations or discoveries or questions that have been arising, kind of percolating up through your being, stimulated perhaps by the themes that we discussed last time we met, right? Or by your kind of contemplative explorations, your own wrestlings with these gigantic questions. And so if Stephen can keep an eye on the screen and see if there's anyone from the screen who would like to speak, and I'll keep an eye on the people in the room, and somehow we'll make it work. Mada?
Hello, dear Tarchin. Here.
Yes, I see you now.
Yeah.
Speaking from Brazil.
Yeah, speaking from Brazil. What came to me is from this experience, this point of view of being nature and being the earth and the body what came to me were the deities, the white Tara, green Tara, Chenrezi, Padmasambhava, and this dimension that brings me to transcendence, to human dimension, um, into this cosmic dimension. How do you have any comments as to how to integrate what we practice in sadhanas, for example, in tantric sadhanas, and you have the deities that come from emptiness and that just reveal themselves and be incorporated into me, um, with this natural dimension, because they are. I mean, when I experience those deities, there is a part of me that goes specifically to Tibet or to the northern region of Oregon, or and um and at the same time there's only here. There's only now. Um
I think what we might get to today will address this a bit,
Okay.
right? But the real key is recognizing how you're not questioning deeply enough, right? Like just to give you an illustration, you talked about the deities kind of arising from emptiness. But what about the knowing, the experience of deities arising from emptiness? Where's that experience arising from? And what do we mean by emptiness? Does emptiness mean no thing there? Right? Or is emptiness the kind of the ungraspable, spacious openness of interbeing? So you can't separate out the kind of... I've taken to this wonderful word that we use, borrowed, adopted, if you like, introduced to us by Thich Nhat Hanh, this idea of interbeing. And for years it was so juicy for me. It was like just somehow a beautiful single word to encapsulate an immense amount of understanding in many dimensions and domains. But gradually I began to recognize that many beings seemed to be limited in their understanding or their approach to using this word interbeing, because they got an interbeing of things, like an interbeing of atoms born in stars, or an interbeing of this, that, and the other. And they don't seem to, but then they go, well, how do I know that they're interbeing? What about you can have, if you want to allow the existence of deities, you've still got the question of, but then how do I know that there's deities? Like the knowing part. And when we start to really look deeply into the knowing, we begin to see that the only way we know anything knows anything, right, is by looking at responsiveness, right? It's a dance of responsiveness. And so I'm making a very short thing here, right? We could go into it in great detail, but I've taken to saying interbeing, interknowing, and making it into a single kind of phrase, right? And so we start to see the spacious, the ungraspable spacious openness of interbeing, interknowing. Like it's all relational. So we can't say it's this or it's that or the other, but allow yourself the possibility to not only throw yourself with great faith and trust and devotion into what seems to be the Tibetan practice, but to gently hold the question, what is going on such that the universe is allowing me to even do this practice? Big bigger question.
It becomes immense. Yeah.
Well, as Rinpoche, Namja Rinpoche used to say, look, it's Mahamudra, it's not Mini Mudra. I mean, he's making a pun on something, you know, right? It is immense. And then it's too immense, and we want to shrink back down. But we'll get to this further today, right? I'd like to just stop for a moment and see. Let's hold this question. I think we'll say more about it as we go along.
Thank you. Thank you.
Other observations or discoveries, or yes?
I have one small thing. So, say you are speaking with someone that is, by nature perhaps not very spiritual, doesn't know about Buddhism, sees themselves as very much a separate being, as many people do, and trying to sort of explain the idea that, look, without picking up any books or learning any doctrine, just the piece of sort of conveying that you are a part of this. You look at the tree, you look at yourself. For someone that isn't deep into this kind of world, how could you, simply offer them a little bit of hope and peace in the idea of actually you are connected and there is something there, a really simple way to explain that to someone who might be a bit lost and feeling quite separate.
There's no difference between this question and the question of you're in Kazakhstan, right? And you don't speak the local language. And then you say, well, how do I explain to somebody, that I need some water or I need something to eat or something like that? You don't have a language, right? Right? So you're stuffed. It means you can't travel to any country in the world that doesn't speak your language. But that's not true, because you're constantly traveling all over the world, or you might travel all over the world. And what do? You don't speak with words, you speak with your body. Right?
Yeah.
You go, God knows what you do, right? I remember being in China the first time and trying to communicate. I took to carrying around a little blank notebook, and I used to draw cartoons. Right? We can communicate with other ways, right? But so in a sense, when you say they're not spiritual, what you're really saying is they don't speak the spiritual language that you would use normally to convey this.
Yes, and I think yogis of the natural world is such a simple, beautiful, understandable way to put that. That a lot of people can grab that.
That gets closer, but even closer than that is to be with another being. If you're unable to kind of communicate with concepts, can you communicate with your action? Your presence, right? This is much more the key. They're not the problem. I was born in England, and English people learned how to be polylingual very easily, especially during the time of the British Empire and so on. And so if you went into a country where these kind of lower creatures don't speak English, right, you would pull out your little automatic translation thing and you would say, look, it's like this. And you raise your voice and you put your finger and you get a little bit more enunciating the word, as if somehow they're going to now understand you, right? And you think they're stupid because they don't understand you. Look, well, it's all emptiness. You don't get emptiness? Look, it's emptiness! As if somehow if I yell it's emptiness, you'll get it. But if I just say quietly it's emptiness, you won't get it. It doesn't take very much decency and integrity and self-intelligence to realize that the problem isn't that they don't understand my language. The problem is that I'm not able to speak their language. And if I want to communicate with someone, in a sense, because I've taught in quite a few different countries during my life, and I've come into situations where I don't speak the language that the people are there. And so in order to communicate, we have to see, well, look, no, actually, we all share the same mother tongue, right? Which is kind of corporeal knowing, right? I can touch you and punch you on the nose, right? Or gently touch you or stroke you, or I can convey, or with freezing cold hands, or with warm hands, or with gentle hands, or we speak this corporeal language. Before we all learned to talk, we all spoke corporeal kind of language. Right? All of us did. Right? It even goes across. I can talk to the cat this way. Right? So your job, if you find that you're unable to kind of express these beautiful concepts that you would like to express to someone, then really look and see, well, how can I express this in a language that they could receive? Not that they are lacking, they don't have any spiritual kind of feeling or something like that. No, we just let go of that, right? Yogis of the natural world, it's like can I see that you are immeasurable, right? And can I relate to this being that they are immeasurable? And they may not get it, right? But you can't really go wrong.
I like that.
When in doubt, act in love. And if you're not in doubt, then for sure you'll act in love. Other thoughts or questions popping up? We've got a huge range of topics to look at here today, but
Touch of mine was just a reflection really, and it just relates to something that you touched on last time at the teaching, and it just, my own experience, and you sense that in others, that there's just a constant, often unease, with life sometimes, and fear comes in, and it often feels like that's an influence of people. But last session you said something about unfettered love and trust, and that for me just felt like an invitation, just in those moments where you're feeling that unease with life, just to maybe try and let go a little bit.
yes.
The second part of a question that I've posed to you before relating to cognizant
Empty cognizance.
empty cognizance, and then the other part of with the instruction, let my conduct be as fine as barley flour. And I hope the people can hear me. And
No, they can't. Some of them can't.
okay. So I think I expressed to you, I can relate to let my conduct be as fine as barley flour. It's something I can do or not do. And I think I'll just sort of default to that actually in the immensity of empty cognizant emptiness, empty cognizant. I'll default to my conduct. I think that's something I can sort of manage.
Yeah.
And then I think it relates to possibly what I heard, Nicholas, your question about how to relate and the interrelational everything.
Our theme for today is exploring facets of clear seeing, right? And clear, we've got this kind of question we might ask. What exactly do we mean by clear seeing, right? And I would like to suggest that instead of trying to get clear seeing, right, that the best we can do really is approaching clear seeing, right? So we're going to approach clear seeing, right? And this is this quote that you were sort of speaking part of, right? Was from, it's a very, very famous quote in the Tibetan tradition from Guru Rinpoche, Padmasambhava, right? And he was saying, though your view should be as vast as the sky, keep your conduct as fine as barley flour. Though your view is as vast as the sky, keep your conduct as refined as barley flour, right? And you know, in a way, you know, our last time we met, we were talking about the theme of love, and this time we're talking about the theme of clear seeing. And there is a refuge prayer that we sometimes use. I take refuge in love and clear seeing, or we live courageously in this world of birthing and dying. Our hearts embrace all companions on this path of lucidity and freedom, right? And I'm often trying to remind people that when we say this love and clear seeing, we're not actually talking about two things. We're talking about one thing, love and clear seeing. Right? And in a way, although your view should be as vast as the sky, this is love. Right? This is like the ability to look into another being, into yourself, into another creature, into another thing, and know you are immeasurable. Right? You are an interbeing of all these processes. You are utterly unpin-downable. Right? You arise as a dance of knowing in my experience, an empty cognizance. Right? Right? It's there. Christ apparently said, right, you shall know the truth, and the truth alone will set you free. Right? And truth, by the way, is one of the translations of the word Dharma. Right? You shall know the Dharma, and the Dharma shall set you free. Right? You shall know love and clear seeing, and love and clear seeing will set you free. I'd like to just go to another poem. This one emerged for me in the year 2000, right? It's ancient history. It's probably can't be relevant anymore. It's kind of really not modern. I called this poem, gave it a title, right? Sufficient Love to See. The path of awakening is all around you. It is this life you are living. It is this place where you are. It is this mind that is experiencing. Just pause and allow the looking to deepen, the hearing, the smelling, the tasting, the touching, the thinking. Allow this to deepen. Do you have sufficient love to see? That's a big question. Just pause. One could make this a life practice. Just pause and allow the looking to deepen. Just pause and allow the hearing to deepen. Just pause and allow the tasting to deepen. Just pause and allow the touching to deepen, the thinking to deepen, the smelling to deepen. To actually see what's actually here, rather than what I would like to be here. To listen to what is actually being said or sounded, rather than what I would like to hear. Does this have anything to do with, I mean, when we say I'm kind of lacking in clarity, it's usually got something to do with this. To talk about clear seeing, we first of all have to talk about unclear seeing. Right? When our mind is all kind of tied up with me, and opinions, and preferences, and hopes, and fears, what does it do to our hearing, and our seeing, and our tasting, and our touching, and our thinking? But if we really look, what do we see? We see more than we initially saw. Right? I mean, it takes you further, right? You begin to see that, oh, this is connected to that. That is connected to this. It's a kind of interbeing, interknowing. It's a process. It's a fluidity. Feel the fullness of being within and around. Awake, responsive, engaging. It's everyone. A living tapestry of infinite depth and dimension. When the heart is flowering, when curiosity is working its wondrous mystery in the very fabric of one's body of experience, when interest and question are probing, caressing, fathoming, teasing out with endless appreciation the richness of other, when the doorways of sensing are wide open, allowing lightness, the joy of discovery, then we experience wherever we are to be a treasure. Bursting prison walls of alienation and self-absorption. A flood of joy cascading forth, watering the wholesome seeds of everyone. So this is a question that I find incredibly useful for me to ask. Not you. I don't ask you. I mean, that would be embarrassing. Right? I'm not trying to challenge you or put you on the spot at all. It's like I'm asking myself, do you have sufficient love to see? Right? When we talk about clear seeing, well, actually, I want to make another slight detour, and then we'll get to this. Right? There's a tremendously famous within Buddhism text, which is called the Visuddhimagga. I'm just going to read it for you. No, I don't think I will. It's a little fat. Right? I had to, I mean, we talk about these things, but, it's kind of voluminous, right? And in the Theravadan tradition, the Visuddhimagga is sort of one of the great, you might say, Dharma texts. It wasn't written by the Buddha, it wasn't spoken by the Buddha, although there's many supposed quotes from the Buddha within it. It was a monk named Buddhaghosa right? Who compiled all these teachings hundreds of years after the Buddha had passed on. And it begins with a little kind of scenario, if you like. And so I'd like to just remind you of this scenario. It begins actually with a quote from the Buddha. And then it goes, this was said, but why was it said? And then they lead to the fact that the Buddha was once living in Sawasti, and a deity, a deva, appeared to him. Strange, I wonder if a moment of radiant luminosity appeared within him, right? A kind of an intuitive question came up within him that reverberated with all his concern for the whole world. The inner tangle and the outer tangle. This generation is entangled in a tangle, so pray Gautama, who can untangle this tangle? And we kind of look at the inner tangle, and have any of you experienced any inner tangles? Now, I'm not talking about inner tangos. That's another thing, like we could all do tango, right? But no, this is a tangle, right? The inner tangle and the outer tangle, right? This kind of matted network of craving and desire, of hope and fear, of yearning, of wishing, of. Do you know anyone like that? Not yourself, of course. But other people, there's a lot of people sort of like that. They seem to specialize in trying to get elected and run the country, right? Countries all over the world is sort of like that, right? That somehow the inner tangle gets messed up with an outer tangle, and this generation, this process of generating the world, this generation of nature unfolding is in an entanglement of tangles, right? And so how on earth do we sort this out? And so the answer to this was the actual quote at the beginning of the text, right? Which went like this, according to the Buddha. When a wise, and I'm going to edit it a tiny bit, right? When a wise person, established well in virtue, develops consciousness and understanding, then as a bhikkhu, ardent and sagacious, this person succeeds in disentangling the tangle. Right? Now I'd like to just say this again, only I want to start using different words. Huh? When a wise being, right? You got to be, you're wise to start with, right? I mean, if you can start this, there's already some wisdom going in your being, right? If a wise being, well established in sila, that's the word that's being translated as virtue, and it really is talking about a kind of serenity in the midst of relationship, right? Wholesome relating, right? This is like sila. And the key to this is love, right? Well, if a wise being, well established in love, right, should develop, right, a continuity of caring and inquiry. This is the word that's being translated as consciousness here, is actually samadhi. Right? I'm not sure that the translation, I think the translation could be improved. Right? 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 A wise being established in love, like a kind of a willingness to accept the legitimacy. I don't know who you are, but I'm here for you. and we're changing and transforming, and I'm being transformed by it. We're in this, right? Then engages in the activity of developing all the skills of attentiveness, right? And profound understanding, right? I mean, there's people who think that the whole universe is a kind of financial investment. That's their understanding, right? They think that somehow we're going to sort this out with economic rationalism or something. That's their understanding. Or there's people who think that what we're going to do is recycle our soft plastic bags, and that's their understanding of how to fix the world. They're limited, right? Profound understanding is like talking about something enormous. It's almost like I'm attuning to being able to be this river of becoming that we are, right? This is the understanding. We're developing this. We're developing this by looking, right? Then it says, right, when a wise being established in sila develops samadhi and prajna. Prajna is often translated as wisdom. I'll call it profound understanding right now. Right? Then, as a bhikkhu, right? At this point, some of you go, if you know the words, some of you go, what? Yeah, but I'm not a bhikkhu, right? Okay, a bhikkhu is often refers to a Buddhist monk, a fully ordained Buddhist monk. Worse than that, it talks about a Buddhist hymn monk, right? But there's in the Tibetan tradition, the word bhikkhu gets translated as gelong. Right? So there was I lived for a while as a fully ordained monk, so I was called Tsultrim Tarchin Gelong, right? It's like Tsultrim Tarchin Bhikkhu, right? And bhikkhu carries all these meanings. Words only have meaning that people give to them. So if you feel that it's a sexist word, that's what it is, right? But there is a meaning within Gelong, which is quite different. And one of the meanings that you can take apart in the word Gelong, in addition to all the kind of traditional meanings of monk or whatever that means, right, is one who is free to ask question. Now, let's try this again. When a wise being established in wholesome relating develops a continuity of caring and inquiry and profound understanding, then, as a being who's now free to ask question, ardent and sagacious, right? They give themselves to this life. They live life with some passion. You don't have to be ardent. Is a pretty old-fashioned word, but it's kind of nice. Right? But it might be misleading because you think you've got to be kind of excruciatingly passionate about everything. How boring can you get? But I don't think it means that, but it does mean that you have a tendency, you can be really interested, you can throw yourself into this development. Right? Then, such a being, right, who's free to ask question, backed up with the sila, samadhi, and prajna, then through their living, they begin to untangle the tangle. It doesn't even promise that you get, I mean, what would you get if you untangled the whole universe so there's no more tangle? You wouldn't have a universe. It's sort of like, a weaving is a tangle of threads. So you undo the tangle, there's no weaving, there's no bed sheets. It'd be cold. Right?
Why are we trying to untangle it then?
Because
The web of life.
because you're upset about genocide in Gaza because you're unable to breathe in a city that's full of smog. That's there. You're living in a place in the world where the water's undrinkable. That's why you're suffering. This is not I mean, in a sense, it doesn't matter. But what's the driving force that's moving you? Huh? And when we talk about clear seeing, there's a kind of a problem, I think, right off the bat, and it's difficult to talk about this. But we need to at least acknowledge the problem to begin with. And that is, there's a tendency, when we think about clear seeing, to think that there's something there waiting to be clearly seen. And so you argue over whether you've got clear seeing or not. No, this is the way it is. No, that's the way it is. Oh, you see, it's like fake news. Well, that's your opinion, right? And everything's arising in your own mind, and you can't get out of that. So what is there what do we mean by clear seeing, right? And when we say, I see, right, when we, our friend, many of you know Kelvin, and Kelvin, our friend, is blind in a traditional sense. And blind Kelvin sees a lot more than an awful lot of people that I know, right? And in fact, he even uses the word seeing. He says, "Oh, do you see what I mean?" Or I see, or right? I mean, we're not talking about our eyes functioning. We're talking about understanding. Clear seeing is clear understanding. And right, clear understanding is understanding, you might say, I'm really getting out on a limb here and punning it a bit, but it's like understanding that clears away, right, blockages that we thought were there. Right? In other words, an understanding that opens up possibilities of where to move instead of just being stuck with this. We're not talking just opinions. Right? And so the question that we want to raise today is the question of you might say there's facets of this, like there's different facets of clear seeing, of the process of seeing more clearly, of knowing, understanding, engaging more clearly. And it depends a lot on where we're starting, right? And so at the beginning, we've got a tremendous amount of, have you ever noticed, again, it's like, I can be facetious and say other people, we all know this, hope, fear, right, grabbing, right? We have these kinds of tendencies, do we not? And so we start to the first step, you might say, the first facet, we could say these are kind of steps towards clear seeing, approaching clear seeing, is to begin to acknowledge how hope and fear and opinions and bigotry and small-mindedness and vindictiveness and anger and all these kinds of things, right, shape the seeing so that we only see, quote, from a limited experience. We see from the experience of our, do you get this? I mean, this is, you think, well, this is a big problem though, because it's not easy to solve. How can you not see from your limited experience? Right? Right? But to begin to at least acknowledge that is the first step, right? And somehow being reminded of this, sometimes we're mostly reminded of it by falling on our face and discovering that our opinion doesn't work. Finally, after dogmatically trying to push it through, we finally forced to recognize this isn't working. We don't know what to do now, but at least we recognize that it's not working. Right? This is kind of like a first step. And then at that point, this is very much tied up with something in Buddhism which has a bad name. It gets bad press in Buddhism. It's called self. Right? And so, because not only I fear, I hope, me, 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 me. Do you have sufficient love to see? What you. I mean, we all have moments of you. But we all have many, many moments of me, 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 me. Right? And it has this flavor, if you like, of hope, fear, opinion. Right? You get this, right? And we try to kind of solve the problem of the pain of that hope and fear by bludgeoning the other being to see the way we're seeing. It never works, because eventually it rains, or you get a drought, or you get a famine, or you get a war, or you get a illness, or a pandemic, or an accident, or something, right? In other words, and which tells you that actually I can't control the whole universe. And so then we start to kind of think, well, I've got a terrible self. My self is always like defiled and horrible and stupid and ignorant, and these spiritual paths love to do this, right? You kind of berate the self down, right? And so you take the second step on the path. The second step on the path of developing clear seeing, love and clear seeing, right, is to take steps to get a better self. It's just a little thing, right? And we do this by working in the way that we can work. And that is that basically we try and think our way out of all our problems. So the first practice is a practice of thinking. And just to kind of point towards some very traditional expressions of this. In the Tibetan tradition, for example, you might think about what's called the 4 thoughts to turn the mind to Dharma. Right? They kind of, like orienting the mind towards something that's sort of good. Right? But we can also, for example, study and think about and then try to activate the 5 trainings. I will train myself to appreciate and support the lives of all living beings. I will live with a sensitive and responsible awareness for the whole ecology of life. And by setting up this kind of thinking as like, I am going to work on this. This is not like you have to do it in a weird posture, or you have to burn incense when you do this, or you have to light candles, or you have to kind of, go to the temple or something like this. No, this is like right in the privacy of your room, in the midst of a work argument, in the midst of a family kind of problem, in the midst of, right, what's facing you, right? I will support and appreciate the life of all living beings. I will live with a sensitive and responsible awareness for the whole ecology of life. I will train myself to dwell more and more in the mind of spontaneous generosity. Daily I will give material support, emotional support, and an example to others of awakening in action. You see, our actions here are not as fine as barley flour. Right? They're kind of lumpy. They're gross, right? We start off like with this big, lumpy, gross thing, and what we've got to do is like maybe take steps, live in a way that refines. It's all very well to start off, let my actions, let my conduct be as fine as barley flour, right? Which is very fine if you gotta just like feel it, right? But actually, many moments of our living, it's much lumpier than that. It's sort of like barley grains, maybe. Right? So you get a hammer and you start kind of, that's how they used to make, I don't know if they still do, but they in the Himalayas, the kind of refugees, Tibetan refugees and untouchable class and so on, this was back in the 60s, right? The only way they could earn any money was by making gravel, right? So here in New Zealand, they take boulders and dump them in these massive machines which grind them all up to gravel of whatever fineness you want. There, they give these people hammers and they sit on the side of the road and they go bang, 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 and they take a big rock and make a smaller one. Take a smaller one, a smaller one. Eventually you get powder, it's like fine. You got to kind of work at it. Right? So this is kind of working at a kind of a crude level. I will train myself to dwell more and more in the mind of spontaneous generosity. Daily I will give material support. Okay? What material support have I given today? Emotional support. What emotional support have I given today? And an example to others of awakening in action. Right? In what way have I done this? Right? You're working on this. It's not fine meditation. You don't have to keep your mind locked onto your breath. We'll get to that. Right? I will train myself to use the senses to further awakening, explore Dharma, and come to know the world more profoundly and more compassionately. Okay? All of these are beginning to kind of open up the possibilities of seeing. And in the effort to train ourselves in these things, we become really clear about the moments when we're not doing this. If we don't have this kind of effort to train ourselves in it, we kind of drift in and out and we never really notice. We kind of just move on. Whereas if you go, oh no, I'm actually hurting beings. I'm actually quite willfully hurting beings to get my own way. I don't want to do this. Right? And then maybe it's hard. You've got a big inertia to do this, right? But at least we're beginning to put on the brakes. It's the first facet of working towards. These aren't facets of clear seeing. These are facets of ways of approaching clear seeing. Right? Through listening deeply and speaking truthfully, I will train myself to communicate in a skillful and compassionate manner. Right? This is this work right in the midst of our daily living. I will train myself to be ever more directly aware, not aware because I read it in a book that eating these things was good for me or not, but trying it out. I will train myself to be ever more directly aware of how nutriment affects the mind and body. Right? I will eat and drink and nurture myself and others in a way that supports awakening. And this is the sila, right? These 5 trainings are in a sense training in wholesome relating. Right? So a wise person well established in this, right? If they should then develop concentration, meditation, kind of skills in attentiveness, and deepening understanding about the nature of the universe and mind and how it all fits together, right? Such a being is then free to ask question, and they can begin to take the steps of untangling this tangle, right? Of seeing more clearly. Right? Now the third facet, right, is actually now we start to experience more and more moments of absence of hope and fear. we can approach the absence of hope and fear experientially through it's almost like a two-step process, right? It's not really just a one-step process, but it kind of can look like a two-step process. And that is that the first step, I'm speaking from a Buddhist perspective, right, is to make yourself familiar with all the teachings that emerge out of the Satipatthana teaching of the Buddha on foundations of mindfulness, and in it there are dozens and dozens and dozens of suggestions of different angles of inquiry which you can then carry out. And for many people, it's like their idea of studying Satipatthana is to study all the categories in the Satipatthana, which includes breathing meditation and body awareness work and awareness of feelings and awareness of states of mind and how they come into being and how they pass away and how they are interbeing, interknowing dancings of everything, right? We're like really looking into this, right? And so you'd study in it and you'd learn all the different names and categories and so on, and you know there's this and then and the process, first you do this and then you move to that and then you do this and then you say, I've studied Satipatthana. But actually, right, there are a few people who are participating this morning who are actually studying Satipatthana. Now these are people who have actually, in a sense, spent a long time thinking about it. They've gone over it a million times, and they've kind of started to internalize the intent, so that it's now the study. It has nothing to do with remembering the categories or anything like this. It's a beginning to look into. And so this is absolutely to come to clear seeing. You can try and come to clear seeing simply by trying to force yourself to be a moral, better being, right? But actually, it's not going to work. You'll just continuously come up against problems. We need to look more deeply. And that requires a kind of discipline which will emerge, the oomph, the ardent and sagacious. The bhikkhu, ardent and sagacious, can untangle this. That we begin to apply these themes in the context of the life we are living, not try and go to the place of Satipatthana or go to the place of Tibetan sadhana. It's not in the north, it's not in Tibet. It's right here in this moment of living that I am. There isn't anything else to work with. Okay? And now it's time for the... do any of you watch YouTube things? You know, and everyone's constantly saying, oh, would you please subscribe to my channel? It'll help me. I'm trying to get 1 million subscribers, and you know, and then you know, you got more people. So that, well, now we stop for a moment. I'm going to do the little advertising plug, right? Satipatthana, 4 foundations of mindfulness. These are breathing, right? Breathing is one tiny little section in the Satipatthana. And now there's a whole, open it up even further. But, you know, it's not just sitting around on your butt on a cushion. It's walking. Walking in wisdom. And if you don't know where to begin and you've got an interest in kind of looking more deeply into this, that you have a foundation in the 5 trainings. I mean, in the intent behind these 5, we could have 6 trainings, we could have 7 trainings, we could have 2 trainings, right? There's a story of the Buddha once who, one of his monks sort of was getting frustrated and, you know, like fully ordained monk when I was ordained, you took something like 247 precepts, you know, it's like a staggering number of rules, and right. And anyway, came to the Buddha and said, well, like I have to drop out of the order. Like I can't possibly keep all these rules. It's too complicated. And the Buddha didn't want him to drop out of being a bhikkhu. Right? He thought being, you know, like being a bhikkhu meant simply wearing a monk, you know, monk's robes and so on. But the Buddha didn't want him to drop out of being free to ask questions, to inquire, right? To really look, to be curious about the world and how it works, right? And so he said, well, you could stay in the order. Well, how about, you know, what if we reduced it to 100? You started to bargain with him, right? There's a story of this, and no, I couldn't do it. Even 100's too many. Well, what about 10? You know, like just 10 precepts. You know, like no, I couldn't handle that. Well, 5. Could you do 5? You know, there's 5 traditional precepts. What I spoke today was simply the precepts expressed in a positive way. Traditionally, they were expressed in a negative way. I will train myself not to take the life of any living being. I will train myself not to take that which is not given, right? So that way. And the monk said, no, I couldn't do that. 5. Look, I'm sorry, I'm really stupid. I can't even remember the 5, you know, it's like too much. The Buddha said, well, look, could you handle 2? And at that point, he got him, right? And he said, well, maybe I could handle 2. And so the Buddha said, good, cultivate wisdom and compassion. Bottom line, you know, like, right? Cultivate sila, right? Cultivate, right? Sila, samadhi, prajna, right? But then we might feel that we want to go a bit further with that, right? Not because I'm trying to be a spiritual being and spiritual beings meditate and so on, and I have to do my meditation, right? It's just that I want to somehow have sufficient love to see. This is critical to me because it's too painful to have insufficient love to see. We could say that all pain, all suffering comes down to problems of lack of love. Right? And so this is unlike me. I don't usually try and sell these things. I don't push these things. Do it if you feel that you can be moved. And there's countless others. Ty's written so many books. I was just saying to Mary this morning, it was easier for us being Buddhist beginners in the 1960s and 70s. It was a lot easier, right? Because actually the Visuddhimagga was translated then. There was a kind of one translation of the Pali Sutras, you know, by the Polytext Society, and there was, you know, the odd book around, but not very many. So it was easy. If you wanted to study, you read these things, and you worked with them. You didn't just read them. They're not that interesting. It's like trying to, you know, it's a thrill reading a recipe book. I mean, yeah, they're just recipe books for love and clear seeing, right? And so, but if there's a thrill in it, it's eating the cake. It's eating the love and clear seeing. It's eating the stars, wearing the stars, being the stars, the luminosity, right? Is the star the light, or is the star the substance? We see the light, but we don't see the atoms, right? But should you wish to go a bit further, right, then we begin to kind of work on that, right? And so we start to gradually, by looking more deeply in, we begin to soften the sense of our understanding of self. I begin to see that I'm interdependent with others, and I cannot see where my self begins and their self ends off, right? There's a kind of an extraordinary openness here. It's starting to be more kind of refined, more kind of, there's a feeling of, like, it's less lumpy, right? At the beginning of our training, it'll be quite lumpy, watching my breath, there's a feeling, wandering mind, come back. It's just like you think that study of Satipatthana is just a mega control trip, right, of your attentiveness. Well, that's lots of people's experience, but it's really a beginner's experience. It's not the intent behind it. There's a gradual fluidity of kind of noting and engagement, right? And along with that come kind of, so where do I begin and where do I end off? Right? And of course we grab at answers to this, right? But they're all kind of provisional. But our way of engaging with people, we begin with the sila and it continues on forever. We begin to add skills in samadhi, right? And that continues on forever and it interweaves with our sila, right? And gradually a kind of understanding starts to come. Okay? And we come to a place where perhaps what we used to think of as clear seeing is more like deep listening. It's like there's a fluid attentiveness, a kind of, there's almost a sense of this. I've got a couple of further verses to share with you. Right? This one appeared in 2013 in Shoreham in Australia. And I called it, because I didn't have a title, but then I was putting together a collection of the poems, and sort of like the way I ordered them, they needed titles, so I invented titles. But it's not really a title. But I called it Contemplating the Biology of Assigned and Assumed Value. We forget, we assume things, this has value, that doesn't have value. But actually the value is assigned as well, like what's and how do values emerge out of our biology? In the full richness of being, all elsewheres lose their value. And even cherished values lose their value. In the all-embraced, ever-creating, unpin-downable, measureless, unfolding now, this empty cognizance, the yearning for some other, the private titillations of somewhere else, of tomorrows and yesterdays, of pains and losses and rising heat of expectation, all of these writhings, the dancing juices and structural couplings of myriad realms of living community shine like an illumined ball of mist, translucent here-ness, posing as opaque there-ness. In the full richness of being, money falls apart, in a way of being in which all that is freely available, in its very instance of happening. Gratification of elsewhere loses its value, and we enter while being entered. We embrace while being embraced. We give ourselves, all of ourselves, an ecstatic, flexing, generous responding, utterly, completely, with no holding back, nothing hoarded for just in case, giving ourselves in and to the ever-present immediacy of living process. weavings of appearance and magic, integrations of everything. We could say that, you know, as long as there's me and there's other and there's elsewhere, right? As long as it's there's still possibilities of our seeing. Like, is this clear seeing? In a sense, there is a clear seeing is a clear light. It's luminosity. It's a lightness of being. It's like a clear lightness of being. It's like sometimes you live. Have you ever had a day when you felt a bit heavy? This is strange, right? It's just like the contradictions in our language. It's just totally mind-boggling sometimes, because you know there were days when some of us, way back there, long time ago, another lifetime, right, when we used to kind of avail ourselves of things, substances like LSD, right, and you'd have this kind of experience of incredible lightness of being, right, like, and you'd say, "Heavy, man." And I don't know how this incredible lightness was so, we called it heavy, you know. But it's like, it was weird. Like, but then they're pretty weird on how we say, quite often, you know, that's sick. That's really sick, man. Right? When you're saying it's wonderful, like it's like strange, right? And never mind this, we do this kind of thing. But there's a kind of a lightness, right, in this fluidity. If I begin to see more clearly that everything is a kind of a fluid process, right? And this kind of seeing is constantly interrupted by me here seeing that it is a fluid process there. Right? It's subtle. It's like we're banging the rocks on the side of the road until they're talcum powder. Right? It's like we're banging the barley bits until they are as fine. And because our seeing is our action. Our understanding is our conduct. Your conduct is an expression of your understanding. Right? Though the view should be as vast as space, keep your conduct as fine as barley flour. Right? Because the Tibetans, they didn't have wheat flour, they had barley flour, tsampa, and so forth. Getting a kind of a feel, and we kind of approach this like different kind of facets. We could say, oh, I'm clearly seeing this, right? When I'm not kind of bothered by gross hope and fear, right? I'm in a, when I'm not in an unwholesome state of relating, I can feel, oh, now I'm clearly seeing this. As soon as I'm in a kind of an unwholesome state of relating, I feel like I'm not kind of, it's like, you know, trying so hard to see. I'm obviously stuffed as far as this goes, because I'm now experiencing wet macular, age-related wet macular degeneration, it's called, amongst this concatenation of seemingly miserable kind of physical sort of disabilities. Right? One of them, one small one, is that I can't see with my left eye, right? And so it's kind of like it's all blurry, right? And I realize how much I loved to what I call clearly see. That's why I was obsessed with looking down microscopes and telescopes and magnifying glasses. And I loved really seeing things from, wow, this is so clear, right? And yet, at that moment, I wasn't clearly seeing how the flow of the universe was giving rise to this moment, which was someone feeling they were clearly seeing something else. And yet my intuition was beginning to sense how the whole thing flows together. I've lost my watch under piles of paper here. Good. Here's a pith instruction for love and clear seeing. And it was a poem by Shabkar, right, who was considered to be like a kind of more recent version of Tibet's Milarepa, right? He was a Tibetan monk, lama, yogi, right, who, like Milarepa, sort of spoke poetically, and there's huge volumes of poems that he wrote and so on, and from his experience. So this is Pith Instruction by Lama Shabkar. All appearances are vast openness, blissful and utterly free. With a free, happy mind, I sing this song of joy. When one looks towards one's own mind, the root of all phenomena, there is nothing but vivid emptiness. Nothing concrete there to be taken as real. It is present as a transparent, utter openness, without outside, without inside, an all-pervasiveness without boundary and without direction. The wide open expanse of the view, the true condition of mind, is like the sky, like space, without center, without edge, without goal. By leaving whatever I experience relaxed in ease, just as it is, I have arrived at the vast plain that is the absolute expanse. Dissolving into the expanse of emptiness that has no limits and no boundary, everything I see, everything I hear, my own mind, and the sky, this complete openness, merge. Empty cognizance. Not once has the notion arisen of these being separate and distinct. In the absolute expanse of awareness, all things are blended into that single taste. But relatively, each and every phenomena is distinctly and clearly seen. Wondrous. It might be quite easy to think, well, come on, see things clearly, right? Don't you see? Yeah. But we begin to see that actually clear seeing is perhaps only to be discovered when our actions, when our conduct is as fine as barley flour. And the clear seeing is this clear, open, there's nothing there to grasp, and yet it's made up. It's like it's inseparable from utterly distinct phenomena and experiences. And it's difficult to talk about this, but it's not rare to experience this. But people don't know how to make sense of it. You can't, legislate it. They're not going to be able to put it in the school curriculum. Right? You can't teach it. You cannot teach Dharma. You can use Dharma, right? It's used by the wise, each for themselves. right? That we kind of live our way into this refining. A sense, a willingness, a kind of aspiration to embrace, which in a sense becomes, when they say vast is the sky, all they're saying is it means that there's no ages to it. You don't find a kind of an end to the sky. It's kind of, it's endless, it's immeasurable. So these are kind of different facets, you might say. You know, when we get to this kind of last, as we really start to get close to clear seeing, we might say, you know, we could describe facets of clear seeing in terms of it's ineffable. It's openness. It's spontaneous presence. It's this cresting wave of now. Right? It's union. Right? And there may be moments, I hope, for you, where you feel it's almost like you're blessed by this. Moving as this flow of compassion and deepening inquiry, we engage with all beings in ways that support the integrity, the stability, and the beauty of the entire field of life and living. Right? And it's almost like to be utterly engaged in the most letting go fashion. It seems very contradictory at the beginning when we're really kind of seized up with hopes and fears and me and you and better and worse and all that stuff. But we're gradually refining by looking, by loving and seeing, by love and clear seeing. Okay. Let's pause for a moment, just see if there's any questions or observations or thoughts emerging with this.
Just since the beginning when you were talking about this concept of clear seeing, and as you were speaking, some of the words that sort of came to my mind were openness, which you said at the end, and sort of a warmth, a joy, and also a yielding and a letting go, almost in a way you have to unsee many things before you can see, and sort of those were kind of the words that were coming to me as you were describing this. And then when you got to the end, you actually used a lot of those words: openness, warmth, letting go. So I was thinking that's probably on the right track of what this clear seeing is. It's a joyfulness, and it's just let it happen.
Yeah.
Just be.
We could also think of it in terms of attunement. It's like allowing ourselves to be more and more in tune with every other instrument that's playing in this symphony of our life, right? And sometimes we feel out of tune in a sense, you know, it's like the rhythms are not connecting and it's dissonance, right?
It's more vibrant and passive. It's an involvement.
It's
interest.
utterly involved. The idea that somehow meditation is a withdrawal into some inner peace is a kind of understandable, but actually very beginnerish approach, and it would be a mistake, though, to think, oh, therefore I'm not going to be bothered with that beginner stuff. I'm just going to go for the ineffable, open, spontaneous presence, and so on. And now what? Get your act together. Right? I'll sue you. I'll do this, right? I mean, our way of solving problems, you know, in the world is like we've invented this extraordinary crutch. It's called law and legality, right? And so which is just a kind of a way of disguising the tyranny of force and dominance of kind of muscular power over weaker situations. So we argue over whether or not it's a lawful act of war or a illegal act of war. Then it becomes a war crime. But if it's not a war crime, then it's okay. War is just fine. It's bizarre, right? Absolutely bizarre. Right? But however, to live in a place that has, I mean, actually, the to a degree, the legal system, when it works, has facilitated a little bit more peace, maybe, between beings, as if somehow we can legislate sila. Actually, you don't need any laws if everyone was dwelling in a state of love. I mean, it's very pie in the sky, of course, right? But it's like, but we have fooling ourselves into thinking that somehow the answer's in the law. And I would call a person, if I don't use these terms too much, I use them because other people I speak to use them. But if you see yourself, you're aspiring to walk a spiritual path, right? To walk a spiritual path is to, in a sense, take these kind of ideas and kind of concerns to heart, and then to actually nudge them gently and skillfully, with support of others and so on, in a direction of making it more functional. Yeah.
And while doing this, not clinging to the outcome, because it's sometimes the paradox, isn't it, between aspiration and non-clinging, at least that I've found as a bit of a beginner.
Well, how can you cling to the outcome, because the outcome hasn't come yet?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
However, so what you really mean is you're clinging to the outcome.
Mm.
That is worth looking at,
That's interesting.
right?
Yeah.
It's like just being people. That freedom to ask question is not just a lack of restraint to ask questions. So you're just kind of, what's this? What's that? What's this? What's this? All over the lot. That's not the freedom. That's a compulsion to just be chatty, right? In a sense, when we talk about the freedom to ask question, it's like there is like this cell meets that cell. There's a kind of inquiry going on the part of each cell. It's part of the living entity, right? Can we couple? Can we connect? Do we not connect? It's like they're not thinking these things. It's not I'm not projecting a human consciousness into the cell, right? But if there is a kind of a particular molecule in the membrane of this cell, and it kind of fits like a hook into the loop of the other cell, then they join and they kind of start to work together, right? And or they don't. And we could say that they see each other or they don't see each other.
Could you say perhaps conception is the answer to the questions of the sperm and the egg? Like we don't need to speak these questions. That questions and answers are happening naturally around us all the time. We just have to notice.
Yeah, and we have the work, right? To if coming back to when a wise being established well in virtue develops, right? Now, when a wise being established well in virtue does not develop consciousness and understanding, then not being a bhikkhu and not meaningfully ardent or sagacious, right, does not succeed in seeing clearly You know, do you see a tangle, or do you see a dancing of possibilities and collaborations? You know, we look at it one way, it's a mess. You look at it another way, it's an opportunity. You know, it's glass half full, empty, that kind of stuff, right? But it's like this thing. When a why is being developed actively, engagedly, you got to, you know, in a sense, like you might be raised as a person by your family and your family situation in which there's a kind of a basic decency about you. Just there, you didn't really have to work on it, just there, right? But there are aspects of the path that we actually need to, if we just sit around and wait, they don't happen, right? There are skills in attentiveness that we can develop, but we develop them by working at it. So, yeah. We're coming to an end of this morning. Let me bring my external brain into action. Maybe I need more than an external brain. One of the challenges of this type of gathering for me, right, is that I'm cognizant that there is a saying in Buddhism, the Dharma is good at the beginning, it's good in the middle, and it's good at the end. And so, and what that kind of implies is that there can be people who are like very new and they can get something out of it. There's people who are more experienced and they can get something out of it. And there's people who are very experienced and they can get something out of it. Right? It's kind of universal. But I'm aware that because of the nature of our gatherings, and there's such a range of ages and life experience and interest and background and so forth, right? That these kind of gatherings, in a sense, channel me into being constantly general and kind of big, vast picture. And it's nice. And it's only once a month. We should be able to do that, right? But I'm kind of personally running out of energy for it. And I've been thinking that if we do continue with some kind of gatherings, that I would like to make a theme, that we actually come together as with a kind of determination to work at that theme for a period of time. And the theme that I'm kind of toying with, which is arising out of all of this, is to use the format, if you like, of a sadhana of Amitabha that we crafted a number of years back, and to just slowly go through that with the idea that, you know, and each section gives different angles on. Amitabha is sometimes called the Buddha of boundless light and boundless love. Immeasurable light, immeasurable love. Light in Buddhist teaching symbolizes understanding. So we could say that it's like immeasurable love and immeasurable clear seeing. Right? In fact, Amitabha is sometimes associated as, sometimes described as a Jnani Buddha, wisdom Buddha, of discriminating wisdom. Right? So this is kind of like this, in one sense it's like the whole thing is light, the whole thing's stars. We're stars, we're light, we're knowing, right? My head, dancing in my hair, dancing on my teeth, in my lips, in my, right, my ankle bones. Right? It's a great poem. Right? This is this. And so I'd like to finish today with just touching on something that we touched on last week, and it's just part of the sadhana, which if we do this, I'm going to ask for people to, if you're interested in continuing with our gatherings in some way, right, to perhaps either send suggestions of how you would like to work this, or questions, or and eventually we may or may not announce this theme to unfold. And I was even thinking, well, I've got to get people to commit themselves to it, right? So I decided I'd make a big charge. I was going to charge an astronomical amount of money, right? Because if people, and you got to pay at the beginning, right? Because otherwise you won't. So I decided I'd charge $300 for it, right? And then I knew that some people would say, ask Mary for the bank account so that they could send it. And I say, no, that's not. $300, and you give it to any charity of your choice. I don't want anything to do with it. But it's that sense of somehow, I don't know how on earth do we, because traditionally we've tried to kind of commit people with money things, right? So, but I don't like the idea of that. But you get the idea, right? It's just like
The
this.
story of the thirsty monk, isn't it? He has to pay for the water.
Yeah.
You won't just drink it.
Right. So this last verse, as a way of finishing up, is from the Amitabha Sadhana. I also read parts of this in our first class, but I didn't identify it. Smiling, breathing, present. Feeling my way into the world within me and around me. Contemplating this omnipresent ancestral ground of caring and sharing. A cosmos unfolding. Galaxies dancing. Solar systems of physics and chemistry. Domains and dimensions of movement beyond imagining. Interweaving communities of archaea, bacteria, eukaryotes, flora, fauna, and fungi. Each communal becoming a universe birthed from this ancestral mothering, while simultaneously contributing to the mothering of myriad future becomings. An immeasurable dancing of nature in process. Though I'm sometimes graced with a blessed glimpse of being this ungraspable living mystery, at other times I find myself standing to one side, hungry for certainty, desperate for a sense of place, a sense of belonging, yearning for meaningful refuge in the face of this overwhelming mystery. At such times, bringing to mind and then taking to heart the following aspiration can serve as a breath of life-saving remembrance. I take refuge in Buddha, pure and total presence. I take refuge in Dharma, love, compassion, and clear seeing deepening everywhere. I take refuge in Sangha, the diverse ecology of bodhisattva activity. Through actively cultivating the 6 parami, generosity, wholesome relating, patience, skilled use of effort, a continuity of caring and inquiry and profound understanding. May I be the Sangha, practicing Dharma, realizing the innate Buddha mind for the well-being of everyone. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And I'd like to make a special, particular sharing of the merit for our classes together, recognizing that all of us have benefited by being inspired by teachers on the path of our life. And recently, a friend, companion on the path, a brother in Dharma, right? Sonam Sengye, right, died, right? And he was a teacher to many, many beings. And today, or tomorrow, somewhere around that, there will be many people who felt touched deeply by his life, right? Who will be gathering together to kind of celebrate, right, his life journey and so on, and all that he's offered and given and inspired in beings. And so through the merit of our work here, may all that is good and wonderful and wholesome about the life of Sonam Sengye, may it continue to flower in the hearts and minds and lives of innumerable beings forever and forever. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.